I'm Nicole Murray and welcome to Good Business. Well, on today's show, we look at those plastic cards which are a huge part of our lives. From credit cards to gift vouchers, we'll be taking a look at these extremely popular alternatives to cash and how it impacts the banking industry, the retail industry, and of course, you and I, the consumer. Well, joining us today is a very special guest, a man who can shed some light on this multi-million-dollar industry, the Executive Director of the National Retail Association, Gary Black. Gary, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
So Gary, of course when we purchase items, whether it's online or at a retail store, we're going to be using credit cards and going to be hit with a surcharge. So can you just explain to us what exactly is the surcharge?
Yeah, the surcharge is recovered by retailers to cover the cost of card acceptance. So this might include merchants' fees that the retailer has to pay the issuing bank, or it might include terminals or rental on point of sale terminals that facilitate the credit card transaction. So there is a cost there, and in 2003 the Reserve Bank said to retailers, we'll let you determine what the surcharge should be.
Yeah, okay, so there's no set amount for the surcharge?
No, prior to 2003, retailers were prohibited from surcharging, but after that, the retailer was able to recover what is considered to be the regional cost of card acceptance, and that tends to range between 1% and 3% of the purchase price.
Okay, and so why do they vary so much, the surcharges?
A lot of that has to do with the differences between card issue charges. So some credit card issuers the cost associated with the use of those cards will mean that there is a lower surcharge applied by the retailer, and that cost could vary between 1% and 3% depending on which card the consumer uses.
Okay, and so why do some retailers pass on the surcharge at point of sale and others factor it into the cost of their goods and services?
It's really a choice for the retailer. The reason you might not factor it into pricing is that means that the cash customer tends to fund the cost of card acceptance by credit card customers, and the fairer or more transparent way for some retailers is to say we'll surcharge only those customers that use credit cards. Those who pay cash will therefore get the benefit of cash payments.
Cash payments. And in terms of like what you've seen from the consumer's side, do you see that people tend to steer away from companies that do charge that surcharge, or are they not really concerned with that and they're used to that now? Or?
Yes, there's considerable variation. The significant factor here is that the consumer has choice, and the consumer can choose whether to use a credit card or not to use a credit card, or to use a particular credit card as opposed to another type of credit card. So from the retailer's perspective, the greatest amount of flexibility in terms of payment methods is important, because above all they want to conclude the sale, and giving flexibility consumers around how they pay is very important.
Yeah, and do you see that in different industry, like the retail industry, but different businesses within the retail industry that do that?
Yes, you'll find that retailers' practice around this issue will vary from retailer to retailer, and each will resolve their own perspective on that. And I think that will have a lot to do with the average price of the product they sell, plus their target market, that is, who are their customers, and typically how do their customers pay, or what do they prefer to pay with.
Yeah, okay. And do businesses come to you and ask questions like that to sort of work out whether they should be charging it or not? Or? To
some extent, but typically they rely on their card issuer. So often it will be the bank who will give retailers advice on what sort of pricing policy they should apply, and generally retailers will exercise a discretion one way or the other.
Okay, and so what about online? I noticed that a lot of the times online transactions do have that surcharge attached to it as opposed to in-store. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think much more typical online, because we're not dealing there with Australian retailer practice, but more foreign retailers.
Yeah.
But also for consumers, they will invariably pay an international international credit card transaction, which will be applied by the credit card issuer or by the bank, and that covers the cost of the foreign exchange transaction.
Okay. And so do you think that there'll ever be a time where we have a totally cashless society, or do you think there'll always be that component there?
Look, I think it is probable. We're certainly moving rapidly in that direction, and the use of debit cards and other options for payment are such that I think we will get to a point where cash is very much the minority in terms of payment methods.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good wrap, isn't it? It's changing so much all the time. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that and your experience as well. We really appreciate that.
Good, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, after the break, Gary and I will explore the world of bank ATM cards and gift cards. So stay with us. Well, welcome back to Good Business. Well, Gary Black joins me from the National Retail Association. We're discussing the nearly always convenient but sometimes expensive plastic cards industry. Well, Gary, just before the break, I meant to ask you, with that credit card surcharge, do you think that will always be around, or do you think there'll be a time where we don't have to pay that?
I think for the foreseeable future, we'll certainly see surcharging continue. The Reserve Bank did intervene recently because of some claims of excessive surcharging in some quarters. I have to say this was not the retail sector, it was referencing more to the airline sector and some other sectors. But what the Reserve Bank has said is that surcharging will continue, but it should be capped at reasonable levels.
Reasonable levels, yeah, okay. Well, moving on to other types of cards, ATM cards. So let's look at debit cards and the difference between a debit card and a credit card. Can you just explain that for us, please?
Yeah, well, the debit card is when the consumer draws directly on their own bank balance. When they use the credit card, they're borrowing, effectively borrowing from their bank, and they'll incur credit card charges and cost relative to whatever the arrangement is between them and their bank and associated with the credit card issue. For retailers, it's less costly for them to process a debit transaction than it is a credit card transaction. So their preference would be for consumers to use debit cards in the EFTPOS system because that minimises the cost to the merchant. And
is that the same as like the Visa debit card, where it's not just a debit card, but it can be used as a credit card?
That's right. There are some cards now commonly are used both as debit or credit facilities, but it is the debit facility that retailers would prefer you to use because there's a lesser cost. But for the consumer, once they use a credit card and use credit, they will incur charges that are associated with the use of their own cards.
Their own card, okay. So Gary, on the subject of gift cards, why is it that whenever you walk into, say, a grocery store or a service station, that the gift cards are so very evident?
Because retailers are responding to what consumers want, and gift cards are an increasingly popular item for consumers, and the incidence of the use of gift cards is climbing rapidly year on year. So it's a very important part of retailers' suite of options for consumers, and it also helps stimulate further spending in the retail sector, so it's good overall.
And is it popular for the businesses themselves? Are they really embracing it?
Very much so. I think the use of gift cards by retailers across all sorts of items is increasing as well to meet this consumer preference and consumer demand. So it's very much a very popular item on the retailers' shelves these days.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, Gary, thank you so much for everything today and for being part of our chat on credit cards and gift cards.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole.
Appreciate it. All right, well, credit cards, gift vouchers, just how does it all work in real life? Well, we went out to a local business, Art Time Supplies, and spoke with Kate Roberts.
So, Kate, when you first started up your business, when you came to the whole issue around EFTPOS being able to handle the credit card sales or debit card sales, what were the costs and the whole process you had to go through to achieve just that?
Initially there was a setup cost, which was like putting you on a plan that was for 12 months to establish, so we didn't have to change banks or anything like that. And then I have a monthly rental that happens and that just continued past my 12-month contract. So I am free to change banks now, but it's convenient for me because I've got my EFTPOS terminal, which is with the bank that I bank with.
I'm assuming customers would expect that you have that credit card facilities.
Absolutely, particularly in this kind of field where there is big purchases as well as small ones, and people these days don't carry a lot of cash with them. So yes, it's expected that I would have EFTPOS facilities.
So then, Kate, what do the banks actually charge you in the fees and charges that you have to absorb as a business?
There's a couple of different costs that are incurred. Firstly, just a normal transaction on a savings or a cheque account is a standard flat rate, whereas credit cards are actually a percentage of the total sale in which was made. So that can vary from purchase to purchase. So the bigger the transaction, the more I get charged.
So how do you, as a small business, then have to try to absorb that? I mean, do you tend to go for putting it up as a charge, or do you just try to absorb that in your overall pricing of the product?
I just absorb the costs. The ongoing bank charges are all, for me, fortunately, tax deductible, so it just comes off my running costs of the business. But for the bigger the purchase, obviously the more it costs, and a lot of particularly small businesses who can't absorb those sort of charges all the time are tending to charge a percentage of the sale to cover their bank costs as well. I don't do that though.
Now, it looks great when we have pay wave and those kind of systems. Do they cost more for you? And do you have a pressure on you to get that kind of system, that technology?
Because a lot of my purchases aren't under the $30 or $50, I've opted not to go with the PayWave. I'm not sure on the actual cost to that, but obviously there's a cost to everything. The banks do not miss out on their little bit. So I don't know the fees, but I'm sure that there will be a set fee rate for that.
When it comes to gift vouchers, they haven't exactly had great press. Do you still get a lot of people asking for gift vouchers?
Yes, I do. Mainly because the field that I'm in with art supplies is very much a personal taste. People need to be able to pick their own colours and feel the brushes and do that kind of thing, particularly for Mother's Day, birthdays, Father's Day, Christmas. I do put a very short length of time on my gift vouchers just to encourage them to come in and spend their money.
Because it's real cash and it's out, and for you to have that sitting there, it can become a real challenge for you as a business. Do you ever get from a consumer any concerns about what happens if something happened to you as a business?
Yes, when I actually took over the business there was a few issues with that kind of thing. We decided when the changeover of business between owners happened that we would allow 6 months for any extra vouchers to come in, and I would then approach, which is very rare, that I would actually let my predecessors know that this gift vouchers come in, and they would actually pay me for that. But after that time I didn't honour them. But if it's more than 12 months, then that's the usual standard for a gift voucher anyway.
So it looks like credit card is not only here to stay, but certainly advancing in technology, and of course gift vouchers popular as ever.
Absolutely.
Well, most, if not all of us, have received a gift voucher as a present. They've been in the media recently, and it is the subject of research by Dr. Nikki Jones, a lecturer in the School of Law at the University of Southern Queensland. Well, Ashley Jones caught up with her and asked if gift cards and vouchers are declining.
Well, yes and no, because actually in Australia the gift card market is increasing, and a few years ago it was quite hard. It's still quite hard to get precise figures on exactly how many people are buying gift vouchers, but and gift cards. But a lot of people are buying them. They're a very popular market. There was an estimate around in late 2011 that at least 20% of Australian consumers would be buying gift cards and gift vouchers for their family and friends for Christmas, which doesn't mean that there aren't significant problems attached. And that's really what got me interested.
Well, absolutely, and it sounds to me like it's a situation where people have almost ignored all of the dangers and are just going headlong into it. Did you get a sense in the research you've done that they are in a way, an easy gift?
They're a very easy gift. They're a very popular gift, which is why the gift card market in Australia is increasing, as it has been in the last decade or two in the North American market, in the USA and Canada. But in Australia, it's certainly shooting up. We have a much smaller population, relatively speaking, but we are taking to gift cards because they're very easy to buy. They're very easy to wrap as presents. You can post them to people in remote locations. They're an easy present for young people who are notoriously difficult to buy for. If you want to buy a present for a stranger, a gift card's a very good gift in that regard. So they're very popular and growing in popularity.
But legally though, Nikki, they really must have opened up a can of worms for people when companies could just simply turn around and say, we've got your cash, but we're not going to honour those vouchers anymore.
I suppose the clever thing is that retailers don't say that. What they do is, and they're required to do this by ASIC, Australian Securities and Investments Commission guidelines, they're required to display an expiry date, if an expiry date applies to the gift card, quite prominently on the card. And most consumers, I think in Australia, would expect to see an expiry date on the card, and then they leave it at that. And of course, people and human nature being what they are, people forget gift cards, they lose them, they put them in a safe place, and then they find them a year or so later. But all retailers have to do to get money for jam, essentially, is just let people forget, as they will, and lose their gift cards. And a significant proportion of gift cards, I think North American estimates were that between 10 and 25, and even perhaps as many as a third of all gift cards and gift vouchers which are purchased go unredeemed because people lose them, people forget them.
And was it that inspired your own research?
Yes, it was. It was very much and this is it's a bit of a barbecue stopper topic. You bring it up at a social event. Everyone has a story. Everyone has gift vouchers that they've forgotten about them, must look for them, must find them in that safe place. And yes, I had a bad experience with a cinema chain, which was a local cinema chain. I was a local person, and I found some gift vouchers which I had forgotten about, and I wrote to the cinema chain, didn't have an answer, and started getting a bit cranky because cinema seats, some gift vouchers are really very easily redeemed, and it's very little further cost to the retailer, and cinema seats are certainly an example of that. The cinema isn't going to pay extra whether you turn up or not, and in fact the more people they have sitting on seats the better for them, because you're going to buy additional items. So I started getting cranky, and I complained a lot, and I spoke to a Canadian cousin who pointed out that in Canada, as of about 2007 was when the first legislation was passed, they started bringing in legislation in the different provinces to require retailers not to be able to enforce expiry dates, so to prohibit expiry dates on gift cards and gift vouchers. On gift cards and gift vouchers.
Now, the other side of this coin, though, was that we had situations where companies were in receivership. Vouchers were still valid. Have you done any further work around that issue? Because that just seemed to be walking away, from a consumer point of view, walking away from the responsibility that this thing was still valid, but I can't take my card in and actually get anything for it. Or, in fact, even in some cases, spend more money to actually get it to be redeemed.
Yes, that was certainly an issue with a chain which folded a year or so ago, which then required gift card holders to spend, I think, double the amount of value that was on the gift card in order to be able to redeem the gift card. No, I haven't done specific research on it, but I was certainly very interested, and it's one further example of one of the detriments, one of the risks of using gift cards and gift vouchers.
But it sounds like we're just bypassing all those concerns and still buying them.
Well, the Australian gift card market is around $1.5 to $2.5 billion annually is the latest estimate. And for that reason, I suppose the Commonwealth Treasury Department started up initiated a report by the Commonwealth Consumer Affairs Advisory Council into problems with the Australian gift card market, and that was started last December, and then they produced their report just in early July of this year, and they announced that although there was a level of actual consumer detriment in relation to gift cards, specifically in relation to gift card expiry dates, it wasn't an area that they would be looking at regulating. So there, I suppose you could say that big business and the big retailers won again.
And I guess that will keep your interest sparked too, Nikki, just to keep an eye on exactly what happens.
Well, I think it's important. I think there's a real issue of consumer protection here and a real need for for equity concerns. I think retailers are becoming unjustly enriched, and there's a significant level of relative disadvantage that consumers have in relation to big retailers, which are the ones which primarily produce gift cards, and I think that's really a concern.
So consumer beware?
Always consumer beware. The law doesn't, there are no legal protections of consumers in relation to gift cards and gift vouchers. Well, in relation to expired gift cards and gift vouchers in Australia. So really you have to use them, otherwise you have no legal leg to stand on.
Well, from the legal view to a marketing perspective, I'm joined in the studio by Associate Professor Margie Hume, a regular on the show, for her take on the issues around credit cards, EFTPOS and gift vouchers. Hi Margie, welcome.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, thank you, good to see you again. So Margie, just on credit cards, what do you, from a marketing perspective, how should businesses align themselves with the credit card surcharge? Should they be absorbing those costs and not showing them to the consumer at the point of sale, or not?
Okay, I guess we've got to start at the baseline. What is your pricing strategy? If you're a low-cost provider, most of your consumers come to you because you're a low-cost provider, and they would appreciate then if you're going to provide them with a service that's above and beyond the low-cost or generic products that they're buying, that you'd be entitled to charge for that. Whereas if you're a higher, more premium or quality provider, and perhaps you selling luxury goods or luxury items, like let's use furniture as an example, to then charge your consumer $2,000 for a couch and then say, oh, it's $50 delivery. Really, there's no difference in the consumer behaviour and the buying behaviour of the consumer in paying $2,000 or $2,050. But there is that disconfirmation, which is what we call it, that step back when you go, I've just spent $2,000 with you and now you want me to pay $50 for delivery? In cases like that, with relationship to your pricing model, you're better off incorporating and absorbing those services. Increase the price of your good. It's not going to make any real difference to the consumer and their behaviour in purchasing the product. The negative effects outweigh the positive. So I think with credit card surcharges, one of the areas we do know with not-for-profit organisations, people tend to tolerate a credit card surcharge. They'll tolerate it in a schooling environment, which might be not-for-profit. So you want to use a convenient facility of the credit card, and the school says, "Oh, sorry, that attracts a 1% surcharge." Most people are very happy to use that in that. In situations where there's a very high turnover of credit card usage, if they don't pass that on in some sort of cost addition, it's quite a substantial cost to that NFP or to that small business. So really look to where you're positioning yourself, how you want to brand yourself, and then think about whether you add it on.
It's all very psychological, isn't it?
It is very psychological. Well, consumers are very psychological. And the thing that we've always got to remember, it's very easy to upset people. People want to complain. We have that negative disconfirmation where we go in and we want to find something wrong. Rarely do we actually say, oh, that was a fantastic experience, and pass it on. So as a provider, you need to think that your consumers are coming in, they want value for money and they want the perception of value for money.
Well, speaking of complaining, we talk about gift vouchers, gift cards and gift certificates and things like that, and the bad press that it's had. So how can businesses stop that from deterring consumers to purchase gift cards in terms of expiry dates and things like that?
Okay, well, the first thing with anything in marketing, as we always say, is be upfront, communicate very clearly. The problem that we have is the purchaser is not the end consumer or the end user. So there's a bit of complexity when we look at the chain of command or the chain of purchase. So what you need to do is you very clearly need to identify to the person that's purchasing the gift card if there is an expiry date. Having again said that, we need to look at the size of our business when it comes to redemption. So if you're a small business in a local community and someone's bought you a gift voucher, you rely on your local community, as I think some of your previous people have talked about, being in a small environment, and they are the market for that particular environment.
Well, unfortunately, Margie, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your marketing perspective for business owners. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Okay, well, I should also state that Good Business sought comment from the banking sector, but none would make comment. Well, thanks for joining us on Good Business. My thanks to Gary Black from the National Retail Association, Kate Roberts from Art Time Supplies, Dr. Nikki Jones and Associate Professor Margie Hume, both from USQ, as my guests today. We'll see us online at goodbusinesstv.com.au, and I will see you the same time next week for Good Business. I'm Nicole Murray. Goodbye.